Hey everybody, this is Chris with Duluth Machine Works and welcome back. Today I've got an interesting box of tooling for the lathe, so let's not waste any time and get this opened up. So I've been looking for a quick change tool post for the lathe for a little while now. Unfortunately, an Aloris or a Dorian tool post are just a little bit out of my price range. I just can't justify buying that when there's so many other import options out there. From what I've heard and read on forums and online, a lot of the import options seem to actually be pretty good. Shars and Phase 2 seem to be some solid brands. And then I also saw a bunch of different eBay options. This one was recommended on one of the home machine shop forums. I figured I'd go ahead and give it a shot. And this isn't sponsored at all. I bought this with my own money. And so what I'm going to try to do is unbox all this, put it up on the lathe, test it out, and give it an honest review. So the tool post looks pretty solid. This is an AXA-sized wedge tool post, not piston style, and it comes with a machinable T-nut here that I'm going to need to take over to the shaper and make fit the T-slot on the lathe. Seems to actuate really smoothly, and all the surfaces look like they're nicely ground. It's got a nice layer of oil on there. The 5-piece set came with 2 turning and facing holders, a boring bar holder, and a parting blade holder. And I also got 2 more turning tool holders and 1 larger size boring bar holder. Alright, so I've got all these unboxed and given them kind of a once-over. I got 2 different kinds of tool holder, the 1XL and the 2XL. The difference is in this V-slot in the bottom of the 2XL. They're both the same size and they'll both hold up to a 5/8 tool bit comfortably. The 2XL is useful because it'll hold smaller boring bars or round tooling. For larger boring bars, I got 2 different holders. This one will hold either a 1-inch or a 3/4, and this one will hold either a 3/4 or a 5/8. Looking at the fit and finish, I'm pretty pleased. All the grinding on them is really nice and smooth. No burrs. Really didn't need any additional deburring. One thing I'm not happy about is the hardware. I do like the black oxide hardware on the nicer sets, but these do seem like they'll hold up fine. I'll probably replace all the set screws with some black oxide ones just so they look a little bit better. Now I just need to machine this T-nut blank to fit the lathe. They definitely gave me plenty of material on the blank nut. This is the T-nut from one of my old tool posts, and you can see I have quite a bit of metal to move. I'll start by measuring the width of this blank. I'm going to use a 2 to 3 inch micrometer here. Alright, looks like right here I'm measuring 2 inches 241 thousandths. And it's pretty square. It's only off by a little bit. Doing a little bit of math off the camera here, I need to take 0.372 inches, or 372 thousandths, off of each side of this block. That should get me to a final dimension of 1.51 inches, which will fit perfectly in the T-slot with a few thousandths on each side for clearance. I went ahead and brushed the surface with some Dicam, and it's dry, so ready to start the layout. My favorite way to lay things out on the surface plate is to use a height gauge. I've got this held up against a 1-2-3 block to help keep everything square. So rather than just flipping this block upside down and scribing another line, it's better to always measure off of the same datum. In this case, this datum is this bottom edge right here. This is going to be our 0 point for this whole layout. If we did flip it, we would be relying that these edges were machined parallel. So working through the math here, the height of this block is 2.241 inches, so we subtract our cut of 3.72, and that gives us a measurement of 1.869. The one thing you might have noticed here is that I'm not actually setting this height gauge to that exact number. I'm actually adding a half of an inch to accommodate the width of my scriber. After scribing some critical lines, I like to do a sanity check with some calipers just to make sure I didn't screw something up. And looking at that, that looks pretty much dead on. You might notice here I marked which side is my datum. That way I know to not flip it the wrong way when I go to mark the rest of the lines. The next thing that needs to be marked is the step on the T-nut. It's pretty much the same math process. So this right here, this is about 0.95 inches wide, which is a good clearance fit in the existing T-slot. With a little bit more off-camera math, I know I need a scribe line at 0.623 inches and 1.598 inches. So I've got the workpiece set up in the shaper here. I touched off and took a scratch pass right on the top, so I know my tool is set up right. This is a freshly ground tool bit that I just ground specifically for this. The layout lines are not, they're on this back side here, and so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to rough this out just roughly to the dimensions it's supposed to be, using those layout lines as a visual guide. I'm not going to measure anything yet just because I have almost a half an inch of material to take off, and that's going to take a while, so no reason to try to measure that. I've got the stroke of the shaper set so that the tool has plenty of room to drop back into place on the back end and clears the cut on the far end. Time to take some cuts. I've taken 2 passes and the surface finish is looking pretty good. I'm taking a 50 thousandths deep cut and a 5 thousandths step over. And it is rolling up a little burr on this edge here, but that shouldn't really matter. I'll deburr that anyway. I'm going to keep taking some cuts. I have a ton of material to remove on this side, so I'll go ahead and skip ahead to where we're a little closer to the layout line. I made a few more passes and everything's holding up great. I had to add a little chip shield here to make cleanup easier because it was flinging chips all over the shop, and you can probably hear my air filter on in the background because it was getting pretty smoky in here. One thing I can say is with the shaper, wear your safety glasses. Those chips come out fast and they're hot and they go far, and they end up in places you'd never expect. So it's a little hard to see on camera, but I'm getting extremely close to my first layout line. You can just barely see it right up here, right next to the cut. I've only got probably 10 to 15 thousandths left to remove. So I'm going to go ahead and take some measurements with a micrometer on this, and then I'll do a finish pass and see if I can nail that target dimension in one go. So I used a depth micrometer to take some measurements of the block, and after doing some math, I need to do a finishing pass of 14 thousandths. Even though this is a roughing tool, it left a really nice surface finish. I'm going to go ahead and add some dicom to the top of this and lay out the step. So I measured the T-slot in the lathe, and a step of 350 thousandths is a perfect fit. I'm going to go ahead and scribe that with a pair of calipers. To cut out this step, I'm going to manually feed the work into the tool so that I can come up right close to this line without going past it. The first cut's pretty close into the line. I'm going to go ahead and check that with the micrometer. Now what I need to do is I need to keep cutting downwards until I get the step cut out to the final depth. I'm going to use the depth micrometer to check this step, but it's important to make sure that you deburr this edge first. The shaper likes to turn up a burr pretty much every edge that it cuts, and that'll really mess up your readings with the mic. I need to take 58 thousandths off to finish the step, so I'm going to go ahead and take a 40 thousandths cut, and then I'll have 18 thousandths left for a finish pass. And here's the finish pass. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tilt this tool over a few degrees. That way I can feed downwards and clean this edge up. Just enough to give myself clearance. This tool should cut pretty well on the end. So I'm checking this with the micrometer right now, and this needs to be 350 thousandths, and I'm at 370. So that means I need to take 20 thousandths off. I'll go ahead and feed it over 10 thousandths, take another cut, and then I'll do a 10 thousandths finishing cut. So I've got one side all done now and deburred, and it looks pretty good. I'm going to flip it over and basically repeat the same process. I'm going to go ahead and time-lapse that and catch you back again when it's all done. Alright, there you have it. The tool post is mounted to the lathe and I got a good chance to use my shaper. I've got a bunch of tool bits to grind before I get started on any lathe projects, but after that I've got some cool things planned. Thanks for watching.